Can we get in here first?
Yeah, no.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so
You're
much.
right.
Love you. I love you, girl. I love you. It's been 20 years.
Don't tell my age.
And you ain't but 20. How about that?
Don't tell my age. You sound better. You clean a little.
Here we go.
Okay. And a shot of. Yeah.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. You are now listening to Down by Law with Attorney Daryl Gray. We are here in the new digs for WBOK. It's a very, very attractive space.
Why you turn around and look at me with it?
Things are going very well for this station, and I'm proud to be a part of what they're doing. We're over here at Xavier's campus in beautiful New Orleans, Mid-City. This is Mid-City, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, good. Down by Law, guys. Episode title: Where there is a will, there is a way. Where there is a will, there is a way. And we have a very special guest here today with us. If you're following us on live, I want you to go ahead and get on there and take a look at who we have in studio today. Mr. Marlon Guzman Jr., attorney at law, counselor, JD, MBA, a very, very educated, successful businessman and attorney. And he's going to be with us today to discuss successions and estates and wills. Attorney Guzman, how are you?
Oh, well, I'm doing great. I really want to thank you for having me on your show today. I'm just glad that I could join you here. You're right, this new studio does look amazing. It's great to be on WBOK, and to share some thoughts with all of you as we always look to plan for the future and to see how we can move our community forward and upward.
Okay. Marlon, why don't you do this? Give us a little bit of information. Tell us about your practice and your educational background, your experience, things of that nature. Let's talk about who you are and what you bring to the table so they can dig into this conversation we're about to have.
Oh, sure thing. That's something I can do. I could do that all day. So I'm an attorney. I do have my own practice, Guzman Law Firm, but also work with True Title. Run their new Uptown office, 1521 Washington Avenue. Is at the corner of Britannia and Washington. I'm available by appointment, but you can also just text me at my phone number, 504-410-5202, 410-5202. Also on the internet, GuzmanLaw.com, and you can email me at marlon@guzmanlaw.com. Enough with all of that. Getting into more about me. Born and raised in New Orleans. I went to Jesuit for high school. You know, it always matters where'd you go for high school. Is what they're really asking. Went to TCU for undergrad. Got a history major. Also a Spanish minor. Yes, I do speak Spanish. You can call it conversational. If you're not fluent, then I'll call it fluent. Got my MBA from Loyola Chicago. That was after I worked in South Africa for Daimler Chrysler Financial Services, and then ended up getting my law degree from Loyola New Orleans in the night program. Been practicing law now for about 5 years because that's how old my oldest child is. I have a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I guess she's 6 now. Excuse me. So I'm getting up there in lawyer age as well, and my main practice areas are estate planning, successions, and family law. And I think it's a perfect segue to then also doing title work, which is why I got involved with True Title. And all those kind of relate because I try to tell my family law clients that I want them to manage their family situation in a way that can help build as many resources and assets for their family as possible. And then so that goes into estate planning, and then obviously if we plan your estate well, then your succession will be easy for your family to manage.
Okay. Well, obviously, with your educational background, with your experience, there's a wealth of knowledge there. Knowledge is power. We know for our community, the African American community, a lot of times we don't have the knowledge to put forth the proper efforts to secure financial success and stability for our families. And one of the things we want to talk about. We definitely want you to come back and discuss family law and how that affects, you know, some stability and wealth building in the black community. But specifically today, we're gonna dig into wills and succession and what all of that is. That falls under the, from a legal standpoint, you and I talking both as attorneys, that falls under the estate planning umbrella, correct? And that's one of your strong practice areas. That's what you focus on. Let's do a quick tutorial to our listeners on what estate planning is. Like, if you had to give somebody a definition on estate planning, where would you start?
I would say it's the process of arranging your estate, you know, your assets, in anticipation of your death or incapacitation. So it's arranging your affairs in anticipation of your untimely death. I say every death is untimely. I'm not ready.
Nobody's ready to go. We want to kick around. We want to be as old as Methuselah if we can. So estate planning gives you the ability to organize your affairs essentially. You know, what assets do you have? What, you know, bank accounts? What properties do you hold? Insurance policies, that falls under estate planning as well, right? So, you know, for us, we have a lot of people who just get up every day and they go to work. Some people take advantage of, you know, you may have an employee who has a 401k program, a matching 401k program. If you're like most Americans, you know, one of the tenets of the American dream, one of the main pillars of the American dream is to purchase a home, right? So a lot of times we found, especially here in New Orleans, with families going back generations and generations and living in the same property, you know, multiple generations, we always find that people here own a lot of property, you know, in the black community. And that's one of the things, I think that's, and you know, you can chime in whenever you want to, I think that's one of the pillars of building wealth, property ownership. And if you're inheriting a property that, you know, that your grandmother owned and your mother inherited, and now you and your sisters or your cousins have their property, you know, there's value there. There's intrinsic value in their property.
Absolutely. And we see that in our community a lot of times. People are able to acquire a home and start to build that wealth. But what we run into sometimes is making sure that we retain that wealth and transfer that to the next generation. You know, some other communities really focus on that and highlight that, and maybe that's something that we can improve on in our community. A greater focus on how to ensure that the wealth that we've built is transferred to the next generation. I find that sometimes people either don't do enough or do too much to sort of protect their assets, and that when they do too much, they get a trust or make some other type of estate plan that is more complicated than it needs to be. Whereas when they don't do enough, you end up with a situation where people are living in the house for multiple generations, but the person living in it is now, you know, not taking responsibility for the maintenance and the upkeep of the property, whether it be paying the taxes or just keeping the house from falling apart. And there's multiple heirs, and now the other ones that are willing to take responsibility aren't living in it. The one that is living in it isn't taking any responsibility. Next thing you know, that's where you end up with this tax sale, and, you know, now somebody else buys the property and is able to invest some of their money to reap the benefits that somebody from our community had actually started to sow.
Okay. And we see now that New Orleans has, I think since Katrina, it has been a huge shift in the demographics in a lot of traditionally black neighborhoods. I think that's termed gentrification.
Well, I wasn't gonna say it's not. It has a negative connotation, but
Right.
It doesn't always mean bad. I mean, if you want to gentrify and I own a property in that neighborhood, then we all come up.
Right, exactly.
But that's the key, is that you maintain the firm ownership of a property, so that way you can sell it properly in the market, whether you renovate it and sell it, as opposed to it being sold for pennies on the dollar,
With
with a tax sale or foreclosure, or whatever it may be.
Or if you want to retain ownership of the property, and if it's been in your family generations, there's no mortgage, you can always get a HELOC, which is a home equity loan, that could help you build wealth, start a business, invest in other properties in the community, things of that nature. But first and foremost, you have to establish the proper ownership and succession plan in order to prevent those kind of issues that you're talking about, like with the tax sales and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So, like if you had to give, like somebody's coming into your office and they're meeting with you, and they haven't, just, say 3 siblings or 2 siblings, and they inherited the property from their mother through a succession without a will in place. So let's talk about first. Give us a little short tidbit on the advice that you would give that person, and then segue that into discussing wills and why that's important.
Well, a lot of times I'm actually thinking about a few times in particular where someone came to me and they had inherited the property with their siblings, and they weren't sure what to do at that point. They had not opened up the succession, and it was kind of just in limbo. And that's always the hardest cases to deal with, because you know that it requires now some additional investment so as to move this property from limbo to ensure that it stays in commerce. And I think sometimes people get short-sighted and look at how much they would have to put up at that moment in time, why are the other people not paying to have this handled, and they may be hesitant to make that investment. Now, as you're sort of then speaking to how do you prevent that situation from occurring is where you start talking about some of the estate planning, where as someone who has acquired assets, knowing the disposition of your survivors and your heirs and who would be the best to manage those assets, and that's sort of where you then start with estate planning. And what I always tell people, they'll come in and they'll tell me, well, this is what I want, can you do this for me? And I said, let's back up. What are you trying to achieve? Then I'll tell you what's the right product or procedure, if you will, to handle that. And so, for example, somebody's like, I really want a will. Okay, so you say you want a will. Well, how do you want your property to be disposed of when you pass? Well, I have one child, and I want everything to go to them. I'm like, well, you really don't need a will, because that's the default operation of law.
Right.
And when you start getting to need to do things that are not the default operation of law, or you have, say, non-traditional family structures, then the need for a will increases or becomes more apparent, such as the fact that if you have a new wife, you have kids from more than one woman, and you just got remarried, your kids from the other women can demand that your new wife put up security, put up funds to protect your other children's interest. Now, they can't do that if it's their mama,
right?
But they can do that if that's your new wife. But you do a will and say, I waive security, well, that's done. That's gotten rid of. So little things with your will can go a long way. But sometimes also people get into the realm of complication. They'll talk to some of these people that try to sell trust. I'm like, I do trust. And there's a need for trust. But sometimes people add a trust in there, and all it does is add complication.
Complication situation from a legal standpoint is not even needed.
Not needed.
Yeah.
But now look, if you come to me and you said, look, I need to do a little will, I've got $3 million in assets. Whoa, let's talk trust. Let's talk trust. And that's like, tell me what it is you need to achieve, and then we can start crafting the right solution. But really, I always tell people when they come and meet with me, like, you don't have to take what I say as the Bible. Take what I say for what it's worth. Really, you should be doing your own research at home. You should be getting educated. All these YouTube videos teaching you how to knit and sew. Watch one that talks about estate planning and talks about how to manage your affairs and how to plan for that untimely day. And then when you meet with an attorney, you're going in there with already some base level of knowledge, and you can understand whether or not they're blowing smoke.
Right.
And also just have informed questions.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this show, is because I want people, when they're dealing with legal issues, to at least have a baseline understanding. And today, with the advent of social media and YouTube and just how Google is so rich with information, the first thing you need to do is educate yourself. We talked about that earlier. You just spoke on it. If if you're going through this, we're gonna take a step back and let's put ourselves in the position of someone who has an elderly parent or elderly relative who's you have to really start being realistic. And as lawyers, we tend to look at things. A lot of times, people think that we are detached, but I think law school trains you to look at human beings as problems to be solved from a legal standpoint, right? So you can't be afraid to have a conversation about this kind of stuff because a lot of, especially us, I don't want Big Mama to die. Hey, death and taxes, right?
I told more than one person, look, I hope I don't sound too morbid. But it's I was thinking about that. I was like, this you could say your untimely death, but you can't say about whether or not it's certain. Oh, it's certain.
It's certain. It's coming.
It is coming.
Death and taxes, man. So if you're let's go back to the example that I'm trying to set, right? If you have your mother or your father who's 75, 80 years old, they've had a joyous time in the sun. They're certainly they're coming to their golden era, golden age.
Yeah, that's better way to put it.
Golden age, right? It's time to start being realistic about what's going to happen when that person transitions, right? So you can't be afraid to have these kind of conversations. You can't be afraid to handle the business aspect. As a matter of fact, it's easier to take care of the business on the front end and then enjoy the rest of the time with them. Because y'all know y'all got with peace of mind. You got that secure, right?
Not that elephant in the room.
Right. Where we going? Then you're leading up to a fight. So and having that person's input is a rich experience as well. Letting them know, hey, this is what we want. We got to figure out what to do with this. You worked hard. You bust your butt.
Two eyes are better than one, and they're the one that has built that wealth. Not only would you want them to have an opinion about how it should go, but their opinion may be worth something. Actually, it is worth something.
Right.
They can actually probably enlighten you. So you shouldn't be afraid to have those conversations because that's how we pass the greatest wealth. That's how we pass knowledge.
Right.
Having those conversations with the older members in our community, and we might be surprised by how much they can teach us.
Right. Exactly. Because they've lived, living is an education. Education is an ongoing thing. As long as you're breathing and walking around, you're going to learn things. So having those conversations with those people and just set it up to where y'all have an understanding, you get things handled. They can call you once they have their conversation. Hey, let's call Marlon Guzman Jr. and get all of this paperwork and these wills and this succession plan set in place. Because a lot of times people have pensions and things of that nature. Let's talk about that for a minute. Have you dealt with that in your practice, pensions and things of that nature at people's during succession and all of that stuff? How does that work?
Most of the time, pensions and 401ks and IRAs, they have their own method of being disposed of. That those beneficiary forms, as long as those are not deemed invalid,
right,
then that is what is holding for those types of products. Now, while they be deemed invalid, if for example, I've had the case where it changed, who was the beneficiary, changed about 8 times in 2 months. So that made the insurance company say, look, jump ball. They put it in the registry of the court and said, y'all figure it out.
He said jump ball. Yeah, and what about okay, so that you've seen that happen before, and that's another thing. That's why it's so important. If your father worked in, Avondale for I don't know how many years he has, some kind of pension or whatever it set up, you need to have these conversations. You need to know what's going on. Bank accounts, what about bank accounts? How does that work?
Well, the first thing that happens is when you meet with me at the time we have to do the succession, I said, well, what did they own? Did they have a bank account? And anytime you look at me with those eyes like, what? I was supposed to know that? I'm like, did you think I knew? And that way, if you have those conversations, they'll tell you, look, I got a bank account with Regions and with this bank or that bank or Liberty Bank, one of the banks in our community.
Right.
Then you already have that knowledge and you know where to go. We know what to get and we know how to handle it. If you go into the meeting and you don't know, then I'm like, maybe I'm talking to the wrong sibling.
Right, right. Somebody needs to, and that's another thing too, when it's a lot of y'all need to have a meeting and discuss like who's gonna run point on all of this stuff.
Absolutely.
You know, some people just have more interest than others, and you can get everything worked out. Communication rules the nation. That's one of my sayings.
Oh, really? All right. I have to remember that one.
So if you have a conversation about things on the front end, you can solve a lot of problems that could transpire once that person has transitioned. There's a statistic I want to throw out here at you.
Go for it.
They say that 50% of African Americans die without a will. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's based on what you've experienced in your practice and what you've just seen in your experience and just being a part of our culture? What do you feel about that? You think that's true?
I think it's absolutely true, but also in and of itself, it's not a bad statistic. I think the worst statistic is how many times do people die that a succession is never open, never performed. Now, like I said, you don't always need a will. Sometimes a will can make more problems, but also we just estimated or didn't put any numbers to it how many people in our community don't have a traditional family setup, meaning one wife, 2 kids, and a dog.
Right.
Then you add to that, well, they don't have a will. They don't have a traditional family setup, and they don't have a will. Then that is more alarming to me.
Right.
I think once you start having a non-traditional family setup, then a will starts raising its level of importance because a lot of people are going to start taking the ball and trying to run point. It's going to look like
That's where the vulnerability comes into play.
Absolutely.
You got all these different moving parts. Like you said, if it's a traditional setup and everybody's just it's kind of easy to figure that out. But when you got a lot of moving parts, man, you got to really dig into talking to your elders and figuring out what's the best way to approach and rectify that situation, right?
Absolutely, and that's the thing. It's easy when it's clearly defined who's running point, and those roles are clearly established. But if they're not, for example, if you don't have kids and you only have siblings, and your parents have already passed, now all your siblings are co-owners of your property.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, if your parent's still alive, maybe not in the best condition, your parent has usufruct over that property that your parents have your siblings have naked ownership.
Not usufruct.
Yes. Where your parents have usufruct and your siblings are the naked owners.
Hey, if you're listening to my voice right now and you ever hear the word usufruct, please
Smile.
call Marlon.
That too. Call me.
Because you don't even want to open that can of worms. Because it becomes like when there's no kids involved and you're talking about siblings and parents still alive, that those branches start to get really weird. And I've seen it in my practice because sometimes we deal with wrongful death claims and who's going to inherit this money, who's going to get it, and then I've had it in my
We
practice.
have that case together. It feels like we did. It's almost like as if you know what case I'm talking about.
I've seen it, and then Lord forbid somebody dies during the course of the litigation, it gets extraordinarily complicated. And when you start talking about siblings and no kids and things of that nature, it just becomes like a very, very insane situation. But here's the thing: you have a solution. Call an attorney. Call Marlon Guzman. If you're dealing with a succession situation, the first call you should make is to someone who's knowledgeable like this gentleman here. Marlon, we got to get out of here in a second. So we talked earlier about 5 takeaways, 5 things you want to make sure that people know to do. First thing being, I'm just going to say it, call you first if they have a succession issue.
Okay, 1. Yes.
Call you first, right?
Call me first, 410-5202. Call me or text me. I'd say the second thing is get educated.
Mm-hmm.
It's always good if I meet with you and you've already have some understanding and maybe I can provide some clarification to you and help direct you in the right path. and you know, because there's so much out there available online. But as you're doing that research and education, I'd say the third point would be, don't buy the hype. If anybody tries to sell you a quick fix or a sure thing or an easy solution, you should be skeptical.
Tried and true. Go with the tried and
Stick
true.
with the tried and true methods, and you know, just because it's easy doesn't mean it's not it might not be what they try to sell you on. And you should build a team. I'd like to be the first member of that team as your attorney, and then I can help you pick the other ones. And so, you know, and then I guess having the fifth one is just being monitoring and being aware of and communicating with your other family members.
Right.
I guess the ones you like, maybe not the ones you don't like.
Right.
And so that'd be a thing, you know, call me, 410-5202, or email me, marlon@guzmanlaw.com, GUSMAN law.com. Get educated, don't buy the hype, build a team, and communicate with your family, especially with your elders. They are a wealth of knowledge.
Okay. And let's give them again your practice area. So we talked about trust, wills and succession today, but you also do title work.
Yes, I do title work and real estate closings, successions, estate planning, and family law.
And we'll definitely have you back for a
Multi-part series we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
right?
We're gonna tie it all
102 parts.
a long time, but we're gonna give everybody the knowledge that they need to be successful and protect their assets and take their family to the next level. You know, for our community, having the tools and the vehicles to build wealth, and like you said, the most important thing is to keep the wealth.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
know, don't let Big Mama go work for 40 years for somebody, buy houses and build assets, and then you guys can't
Drop the ball.
get together and make it make sense. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Have that conversation with her. If at bare minimum, let her lead the conversation. Big Mama, if you're listening, grab those kids, go get a lawyer, call Marlon, figure it out, put it together, put it on paper, make everything easy for everybody else.
Yes.
All right. Real quick, I want to make an announcement. You guys know that I'm one of the partners in Wright and Gray, personal injury lawyers. We have a scholarship fund for high school seniors, and if you go to our website, www.wpglawfirm.com, you can get all the information. If you are a senior in high school, or you have a senior in high school, please do the essay so we can give you some free money for school. It'll help. All right? This has been an episode of Down by Law. We appreciate you guys. We appreciate you, Marlon Guzman Jr.
Pleasure
Thank you for
being
being here. And we'll see y'all next week. Down by Law. Thanks.